welcome to the Edison Club podcast. I'm tonight's host, Cole Ayers, with my teammates Enraged Peacock, say hello,
Yo, yo.
and my other teammate, Ty Payne.
What's up? What's up?
And tonight, our guest is the one, the only, Joe Giorlando.
How you guys doing?
Doing good, doing good. Let's get straight into it. You are a very renowned player and also now commentator for some time. What got you into Yu-Gi-Oh?
I think a lot of people my age who play can just go back and say that it was the television show. For me, that's what it was. I remember it was probably 7th or 8th grade watching the first season of the Yu-Gi-Oh television show, and that's what hooked me. And then I didn't know cards had been printed yet. You know, this was back in the day where internet existed, but it took a while for some things to disperse. And I remember seeing the first pack of cards that I ever bought at the KB Toys at the Burlington Mall in Massachusetts. And then obviously I put 2 and 2 together that what I had seen on the television show had translated to actual tangible cards. And then from there, it's just been, 25 years of being, depending on exactly when, from completely active to just kind of paying attention. But it's been basically 25 years since buying that pack of cards after watching the television show.
Yeah, I think that is
kind
how
of
a
an
lot of
ongoing
people
joke.
got
Never really
started.
quit.
Go ahead.
What was it?
Well, I was saying that's kind of an ongoing joke too. Is like you never really quit once you first get sucked into the game. Everyone will take big, long, extended breaks, but I don't know anyone that's ever totally quit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's impossible. You just know too many people after playing for so long that even if you're not necessarily active in terms of competitive play, whether that's Modern or Time Wizard, you still have just so many friends that in many ways, just by virtue of either them still playing or you wanting to see them, you end up playing in some capacity.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, because you end up really like all of us have made lifelong friends playing this game, done so much traveling, and it's just it's hard to just put something that allows you to really just travel throughout throughout the United States and for some overseas and to go play in a game like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's opportunities that you would never have had.
Yeah.
For instance, the bulk of when I was competitive and regularly traveling was early in college, late in high school. And it was kind of weird in high school being like, I'm going to Anaheim this weekend. I'll see you all on Monday. I can't hang out this weekend. And it was a pretty regularly occurring thing where back then in high school, I wasn't going to every single event, but, every 3 or 4 months, going somewhere kind of unique and different relative to what most of my friends were doing at the time.
Yeah, most of the places I've traveled in my entire life were because of Yu-Gi-Oh. I think I went to Hawaii for my 21st birthday by myself. But whenever I went to Hawaii, I still stopped by locals and was kind of learning about what their local was like out there. But almost every other place I've ever traveled, like Seattle, Colorado, Chicago, like Texas multiple times, every place I've traveled really has been for Yu-Gi-Oh mostly.
Yeah, I definitely know that feeling that even if you're somewhere for another reason, that you have the inclination to do something Yu-Gi-Oh related. I remember even on my honeymoon, I went to Montreal and we were walking up and down a street and there was a card shop. And I kind of had this feeling, it would be really cool to see if I could buy French Yu-Gi-Oh cards from Montreal since it's a French speaking city. They didn't actually have any. It was all English, but I was a little disappointed. But even then, in that context, I was like, this would be a really cool souvenir for a trip. Because I'd be able to trace it back to these were the French cards that I bought.
It's also just a really nice icebreaker and a really I'm not a very big social outgoing person, but whenever you have a like interest with people, it makes it a lot easier to kind of bridge that gap and be more outgoing whenever you have a common medium to kind of just discuss, talk over, and have a way for a less of a barrier of entry to kind of just talk to strangers, basically, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I mean you can talk to anybody about Yu-Gi-Oh. I mean, case in point, I've only in person met 1 or 2 of you, one in passing, one a little bit more formally, but we could talk Yu-Gi-Oh for the next 6 hours and it wouldn't be difficult.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, really, it really wouldn't be difficult at all.
No.
Speaking on what we were just talking about, traveling in our younger days. I remember me and a friend of mine that me and him played Yu-Gi-Oh pretty heavily together, and we were 14 or 15 at the time. It was right when Honolulu had that Shonen Jump, and my friend
Mhm.
tells me my friend tells me about it. He's like, "There's a Shonen Jump in Honolulu." I'm like, "Why are you telling me? We're broke. We can't afford to go to Honolulu."
Yeah, that was a good. That was the one that Mario won. Mario Mateo, really
Yep.
well-known player from Comic Odyssey back in the day.
Yep.
Yeah, I haven't heard that
Comic
name in a
Odyssey
while.
days.
Yeah, he was one of the OGs. He was good. Comic Odyssey, one of the original teams, dominant for a long time.
That's something I
Yep.
guess we can kind of circle into our next topic because I love how like so your personal channel, the Yu-Gi-Oh history. I personally kind of consider myself a Yu-Gi-Oh historian because I've just been a part of the game for so long. I was always doing it from the sidelines, like just from at home on the little computer I had, just reading articles constantly. And with your channel, you've had multiple like in-depth like rediscussions about it, and it's so cool to see someone else doing that because I've never had the ability to kind of create a content and put it in like such a well-spoken, like concise thought. I would just kind of ramble and yap. But that's one of the main things I've liked about where I found your channel because I knew who you were obviously from just your accolades and you as a player. And then when I stumbled across your content creation, I was like, man, like everything you do is so like concise to the point, very well articulated, explaining the difference between how the format was played historically versus the new iterations that have happened like in the years coming. So what really kind of started you into like your world of Yugi tubing and like content creation for Yu-Gi-Oh?
I think a few years ago, I mean, it's more than a few years ago now. It's amazing how, like, I haven't posted a video in over a year, and it feels like I just created the channel. Honestly, it's kind of wild just how time flies. But I felt
It
that
really
there
does.
was a void in the community for that very specific niche, which having played basically since Tournament Pack 1, like I remember opening packs trying to pull Mechanical Chaser. Now,
Me
was I
too, man.
playing
Me too.
particularly yeah, was I playing competitive strategies back then? Not necessarily. It took a few years of, getting pretty handedly beaten every first round at locals before things really started to click as I started to maturate and mature and get older. But I've played basically the entirety of Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Plus, combined with my background, I mean, you spoke about things being very concise. I'm a high school teacher, so in many ways, my job is to try and make things as concise as possible and bite sized and digestible. So the combination of having just a passion for the game, feeling like I could do it well, but also feeling like I have a lot of personal experience. I remember being in, whether it was literally in the room or sometimes in text chains with other players, as certain decks, which ended up being really big features of certain formats, were built. I remember going into YCS Toronto, the one that Billy won, and talking about, even though the plant limitations that happened with that ban list, limited Lone Fire to one and limited Debris to one, the XYZ advent that had just happened in combination with Tour Guide made that deck still viable, and not only viable, probably the best deck in the room. And I remember going to Toronto and really taking people by surprise that I was still playing plants. And not only was I playing plants, a bunch of people were still playing plants, but it kind of originated in text chains with individuals. I remember texting with Joe Bogley and Jesse Samet going into that event that plants was still the best deck for that particular event. So I can speak to not only, okay, this is the deck list that people played, but this is the deck list, and here were some of the talking points that we had going into that event in terms of some of the card choices. That's why a lot of the decks were relatively similar, and I can speak to even an event like YCS Long Beach with that hero deck that I made to the top four with. I remember sitting in the hotel room before the event with Frazier and actually talking about some of the card choices in that deck. So obviously I piloted it, but I can also speak to that unique opportunity that I had with working with Frazier in terms of some of the card choices in that deck. So it's just the combination of the passion for the game, having played the game since literally Tournament Pack 1, but also not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, I either had direct connection or even in periods of time where I was just off on the sidelines, where I'd go to do a YCS and go 5-3 and think that that was an accomplishment because it was better than the last time where I went 4-4. But watching these events and watching the players and just taking in the event itself, I've had a lot of different perspectives on a lot of the decks that I profiled. So I just think the combination of all of that was why I really wanted to make the channel.
Yeah, you've done an amazing job at it, and everything I've ever watched on it, I was like, "Oh man, I remember this event. I remember kind of what my thoughts were leading up to it. Whether I did or didn't attend it, I would still constantly follow it whenever we would follow like the written coverage. And then nowadays we're blessed where we have like the full video coverage as well as like the commentators and like yourself and everyone else on the commentary team. It's really cool just to see like other like-minded people have such a love for the game, no matter like the format or the model or no matter how you're trying to ingest it. It's still the same like intellectual property just being enjoyed in so many different avenues at the same time over multiple decades at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, thinking back to just the coverage, you can probably relate to just going over every article in old school coverage over and over and over again. So it's almost like so much just built up, whether it was from physically being there or just constantly reading the old coverage. I just remember reading feature matches and feature deck profiles over and over and over again from the original coverage and just feeling like the idea of that aspect of the game's history kind of going aside, because you literally kind of need to know how to navigate to the old coverage. You have to go
Oh
look
yeah.
up Chris Provic, an old school player who has an archive of the old coverage. Like, you actually have to go out of your way to find it. And if you don't know it exists, you literally don't know it exists. So I also think, part of it is making sure that that time period in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, the first nationals, the first world championship, the first, equivalent of a YCS, are still celebrated.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we've been trying to do, kind of like with our podcast and stuff here. One of the main reasons I got really into kind of wanting to be a part of it was just different ways to just like document different points of the game and point of like my life. Because I remember some random videos I'd made when I was like 16 on YouTube. They would never amount to anything, but I still would go back and look at those and see, wow, some of the people I'm currently playing the modern like Time Wizard format, they were still there in those videos, 10 plus years ago. So it's kind of cool to have a documented kind of side from what I do personally, and then taking the content you create where it's just a easier to find and digest, like accurate accounting of like what happened like during those times in history of it, which perfectly sums up the name of it too.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad I got the name Yu-Gi-Oh! History before kind of the big blossoming of Time Wizard took off, because that name, kind of feels like an obvious one.
I'm surprised it was
Uh,
I was available, but you never know.
Yeah, I mean, I had
absolutely.
never seen one before, so
So to circle
I'm a
back to
very.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say I was a very big fan of your channel, and like back in the day, you're actually like one of my favorite players.
that's much appreciated.
I remember the hero deck you played for Long Beach. After seeing that list, I played that deck religiously. I was like this. This is like it was. You couldn't have told me like a better deck at the time of that.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of people really, really resonated with that specific deck, that specific event in relation to sort of what the other options were in that format. So
Mm.
it is definitely awesome to hear that it wasn't just a deck, but it was one that a lot of people really appreciated. And I mean, it wasn't that much of an innovation relative to other variations of that deck. It's not like I created anything out of thin air, but it's great to hear that a lot of people bought into that deck during that specific time period after that event.
Yeah.
That was the event where is that the one where it was the 100th YCS, I believe, right?
Indeed, it was.
Is that the one where Grappa took over control of Konami blog?
No, I think that literally happened at the YCS Columbus, because that was the first one in which it was legal, but then none of them ended up top 32ing.
Yeah,
Long Beach, though, was won by Dark World. I lost to it in the top four, and then Simon, he lost to it in the finals.
I remember that. I remember what you were talking about with Columbus, and that that Dark World deck also, that was another deck I played till like I played Dark World well more than I should have. I played it well into Dragon Ruler when I knew I shouldn't have.
I actually really like Dark World. During that format where I played Dino Rabbit, or Macro Rabbit more specifically, consecutive events, at almost every event, I had Dark World built and was playtesting it on Friday, but I could just never muster the courage to pull the trigger on a deck that had such silver bullet counters like Macrocosmos and such. And all
Right.
the other like Dino Rabbit, there wasn't really like a single Dino Rabbit killer. It's just a deck. Whereas with Dark World or even Insector, like a bunch of the other decks, they were just huge problem cards. So I would always get super close to playing Dark World, but never pull the trigger.
I remember when you put the video up of the Dark World list, and you talked about like you hadn't you couldn't pull the trigger on like playing it. I like it made me think, so like think back. It's like, man, like I wonder what it got me thinking. I was like, well, I wonder what he could have done with this deck. Like, could he have won Long Beach with it? Like, could like he won another YCS with it? It had me so curious because I was a big like big fan, like wanting to I was always rooting for you to. I wanted to see you get your like your win, because I think like out of all the players, I think you you were the one who like one of the ones that deserved it the most, just because of how let's see, what's the way I can put this, how well thought out you were able to just explain, like hear you explain things, like when I watch anytime I watch like videos of like you like speaking, like you're able to break stuff down to where like, man, I really get what he's talking about, like like I would use whatever you would whatever you would talk about, like when it came to like playing, like when talking about like misplays and like anything, I would use it to my advantage and like to help better my own game, and it helped a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. I always ended up picking safe decks for the most part. Very rarely did I really go outside of the recognized top tier decks. There were a couple occasions, like I actually played Spellbooks at YCS. I don't know if it was called YCS Secaucus, but it was in New Jersey, basically the one that Tyree won with Mermail, and that was
Yeah.
before Judgment came out. So it was really sort of an off the radar deck. But very rarely did I do things like that. I basically always just kind of stuck to the perceived top decks.
It seems like you kind of valued consistency over like I guess the way like more modern players would describe it. Like you have like a lower floor or like a lower ceiling but a higher floor is just something that you're going to see like like continued success. Like it's not a crazy breakout huge combo thing. It's just a deck that you know that would be consistent and what would allow you to like express your skill over a series of like decisions, like to outplay your opponent more or less. Is kind of the vibe I've always got from watching like your profiles. Is the way you would kind of like your philosophy and your approach to the game was you'd rather take something that was more of a safer, like consistent version of a deck, and then know that your natural skill through gameplay would be kind of like the leading force that allow you to like see the success that you've seen.
I mean, that may also be why I did never end up winning any, because I would always pick decks that maybe had a higher floor but a lower ceiling. And then once you hit, the top cut bracket, do you really want to grind out 5 more rounds where you need a lot of things to go your way? Because, all it takes is one, high ceiling deck to end up knocking you out. So, it isn't, it is very true that was definitely a contributing factor to a certain decks that I played, that I would play decks that I kind of I felt confident in that they were safe choices. But then you get to the top cut and maybe I just didn't plan for the top cut. Because you actually hear a lot of players now talking about how I don't want to play a deck that tops. I want to play a deck that wins. And that was just never something that I really had considered a lot. Maybe that was just not, a conversation point that was really had, 10, 15 years ago. But maybe I should
Yeah,
have.
it seems like we're like the only thing where it could be a hindsight where it's like you're almost conservative to a fault, where instead of trying to push the boundary, you want to make sure that this has been tested and proved, and I want to just keep doing that, and that skill should allow it to go all the way to the end. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because I know that you mentioned Frazier earlier. Frazier's a big fan, a big friend of the channel. We're friends of his channel, and they've said multiple times, you got to be lucky to win. Like you have to be good to top, and you got to
Yeah.
be lucky to win.
Yeah. It has to be your day. I've heard that saying and never copied it myself countless times. It really does need to, at the end of the day, still be your day, because a lot needs to go in your favor. When both players are low on resources, you do still need to top deck the better card or collection of cards. Because if your opponent does, then you're just going to lose regardless of what happened before.
Yeah, 'cause
100%.
at the end of the day, it's still a card game. Doesn't matter. The best player could beat the worst player in the room could beat the best player in the room if they draw unplayable cards and they have the perfect six. Realistically, that won't
And
happen every single game, but it can happen.
but in the
Yeah.
top cut also, the skill gap drops quite considerably. So now,
Yes.
now if you're playing a deck with a lower ceiling against players that have already made it to the top 32, who in and of themselves have already been playing well for the whole weekend, it doesn't take a whole lot there for, again, all it takes is one match to break against you and you've been knocked out. So I've always kind of thought on that. It is hindsight, because I don't think that was necessarily a conversation point that was really had back in the day, but it's definitely one that is now.
So that leads to a question I guess I've been thinking about, which might be, I think a lot of our viewers would want to know. So I agree with everything that you're saying because I noticed the same thing. Whenever I made top 8 at the Ultimate Time Wizard at Nationals last year, it was 9 rounds, and I played against a lot of really good people. And no offense to my opponents, but my opponent in top 8 was Bronte. And from the first 2 or 3 minutes of the game, I could tell he is by far the best player that I had played so far in Top Cut. Then he ends up going on to win the whole event. So it kind of proved that. So with that kind of in mind, the way you were talking about it, what advice would you give to players who'd want to not only get it to the Top Cut, but try to get to like maybe finishing first? And how has your philosophy kind of, I guess, changed since your competitive outlook, back then whenever you would top and top and top and top? If that makes sense.
I mean, that's a tough question in the sense that, are we talking about what recommendations would I give to do that in modern or in Time Wizard? Because I think the answers can be a little bit different. I
Why
think,
not both?
yeah, so I can. So I think so many modern decks have such a high ceiling by default that it's not as much of an issue. Now, there are some instances where, obviously, uh, let me see if I can think of a good example. Mermail last format, with when they still had Bahamut Shark. Like that deck ceiling with Moon Glacia and maybe even Water Statue, depending on your build, like that deck ceiling is through the roof. It's absolutely through the roof. Ryziel is a little bit lower to the ground, a little bit more mid range, but uncontested Ryziel's still way good enough. There's a difference between the absolute highest ceiling and this deck is more consistent, and it's almost uninterrupted play is just good enough. So you kind of have to balance those two out, in the sense that I think most major deck options that people will have today, if they go uncontested, are going to be good enough. So then it kind of is a matter of selecting the deck based on the format, the time period, trends in the format, and then it's honestly making decisions within the identified top tier decks, because sometimes strategies can vary considerably based on, is it a time for board breakers? Is it a time for hand interactions? Where exactly are we in the format? Or what I thought was actually quite interesting towards the end of the format that just ended, Ed Memento and Mermail, I think, really starting to carve out this, non-Ryziel, non-Malice, but nevertheless still reasonable choice at events. And I think both of those decks have a little bit of a higher ceiling, all things considered. And maybe players' unfamiliarity with them definitely give those decks an advantage. So, if I was active enough in playing, I probably would have selected a deck like Mermail towards the tail end of the format before it shifted over, because that has really high ceiling, but just enough unfamiliarity with players that it lets you take advantage of the high ceiling.
Exactly.
Whereas earlier in the format, I think I would have probably just been on Ryziel, like a lot of other players were, because that's just kind of the recognized, most consistent mid-range, but its uncontested plays are still good enough. So I just think there's a lot of environmental factors that dictate what you should play in Modern. Acknowledging, though, that basically every deck's uncontested plays are good enough. So don't just chase the ceiling. Chase the ceiling if it makes sense to do so. Which I actually think decks like Mermail and Memento kind of did, because you can play all the Charmies pretty effectively. You have a really good going first and second plan. So that's like an example where the ceiling kind of also matches the environment. In terms of Time Wizard, that's an interesting one because I think it is also very much picking the timing. You go back and you look at, the deck that Marcus played. And I think somebody else, I don't remember his name, but I just know Marcus personally, the Gigavice deck.
Mhm.
And then it kind of trailed off a little bit after. But that was an example of going for the absolute highest possible ceiling combo-wise in a format where, the combo decks that had existed, like Dragons, for instance, people already knew about. And people understood that plant decks existed because of Amaryllis, but that was a time of taking advantage of maybe a weak spot in the format. But then in the weeks that followed, maybe there was a lot of oversiding. So I'm not sure you'd want to play Gigavice the week after a couple of them top 8 the Ultimate Time Wizard. So in that sense, it's also very much situational based on the time period. I think those types of decks, whether it's the Dragon Turbo deck, whether it's Plants or any of the other kind of high-end combo decks, maybe Norellas, for instance, I think all those decks could totally win a Ultimate Time Wizard if the format is in a spot where it's just perfect. Like, you don't want to play those decks and play against 3 Gladiator Beast decks, or people who
Exactly.
are main decking more Royal Oppressions than they typically would. So in those, it's just you need to kind of keep them in the back of your mind. Track the format. Has it been a while since these high combo decks have done well? Have people been playing enough Gladiator Beast hating their main deck that Glads have kind of fallen off? Well, then maybe it's the chance to play that high ceiling deck. But if you're looking at a format and you're saying, oh no, the last top 8 had 2 Gladiator Beasts, 2 Blackwings, meaning double oppression, like, okay, this isn't the time. Play something like maybe Vayu Turbo that's just kind of always going to be good against everything in some way, shape, or form. So it's always just picking the right spot, especially in a format like Ultimate Time Wizard where there will be no new card releases. It's really just a matter of picking the exact moment in time to decide if you're going to play high ceiling or more mid range.
That is one of the more fascinating aspects that I personally really do like about the like Time Wizard atmosphere for it, because like you said, there's no new cards released, but if you look at each nationals that has happened so far, or every single one of the Ultimate Time Wizards, there's always like consistent decks that make it to the top cut, but every time it seems like there's something new or something coming out of it, making like not necessarily a meta call, but maybe even deck building to try to take advantage of that. Because for the first couple of years during the World of Time Wizard, Gladiator Beasts were thought to not be a very good deck. And then recently, they've been having a lot of success, basically, as you were saying, do like the high combo decks like the Norleras, the Dragon Turbo, the Frog deck, the Gigavice, all that. Gladiator Beast has a really good matchup into all of those. So I can definitely see, where you're coming up with your philosophy for it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think the thing that Gladiator Beasts have always historically had going in their favor is they punish stumbles out of the gate more than any deck during that time period. For instance, if you're playing Gigavice and your opening hand is kind of slow, but maybe you have like Gold Sark, and you're like, oh, I'll be good in a couple turns, and you're playing against Glads, you just lost, because if you're not going to put up any defense, they'll turbo into Secutor into Herc, or they'll just start generating advantage in a way that you can't keep up with. If you have any type of slow start in almost any deck, you open a hand in your zombie deck and it's got Return from the Different Dimension in it, and it's got, maybe you're playing Ill Blood or something, but you just have all these cards that don't do anything, and Gladiator Beast just instantly take advantage of that, because all it takes is one Glad basically to be able to do whatever you want if it goes uncontested. So the thing with Glads is if people are playing these like 2-card combo decks, 3-card combo decks, Glads have always taken advantage of that.
Yeah, Secure will humble you real quick.
Oh yes.
Speaking
You
of
sure will.
Gladiator Beast, one of your like Edison format Gladiator Beast videos that you posted a while back, that near the kind of a resurgence or beginning of the time waves of Edison format, was really what I think maybe the first deck I built getting into the game, and your video was a big inspiration to me. And I never won anything big. I did win a pod at the first Ultimate Time Wizard though.
Yeah, there you go. That's something.
Yeah, it's something. But that leads me to ask you, what's your favorite deck in Edison format?
I actually played the Ultimate Time Wizard at Nationals last year at the NAWCQ and played Gladiator Beasts.
That's what I was going to say. I saw you playing Gladiator Beast last year.
Gladiator Beasts have always been a deck that I have an affinity towards. There's something about feeling like, not every game, but a lot of games you feel like you really have to earn it with that deck that I really enjoy. Like certainly some games, like I just said, your opponent stumbles out of the gate and it's just a non-game, but that happens no matter what you're playing. But I feel like with that deck, there's just a lot of opportunities and kind of niche interactions that enable you to show some good, just not necessarily skill expression, but just knowledge of Gladiator Beast expression. You
Oh,
know, like
100%.
really good Gladiator Beasts will, they'll be willing to summon Secutor without a defensive card because they know the opponent might just not attack into it because they're afraid of Wabaku or something. And if you're like stuck on Dust Tornadoes or something, like you can get into a position where you like summon Secutor, set some Dust Tornadoes, and your opponent's like going to play really passive, and you just like Dust Tornado them and Book of Moon them or something, and then next thing you know, like a combination of cards that aren't really good together suddenly were really good together. So they're just like little niche things, and then Darius chaining Book of Moon, things like that that just kind of catch a lot of people off guard that I really always liked with Glads. Or summoning Sam Knight off of a Glad is another one where if they know you play Shrink, which I typically do in Glads, you can basically just summon Sam Knight without any defensive cards, and your opponent's not going to attack it also. And sometimes if you're stuck on like a Prisma in hand, you want to end up doing that because it lets you establish 2 Glads for Geyseris. So that deck I just really enjoy, kind of the small things that with experience just playing that deck hundreds of times, which I felt like I did back in the day, you just pick up on.
Yeah.
My absolute favorite deck,
Oh, go ahead.
it might just be that deck, honestly, just Glads. But I don't think I'm actually going to play at the one in Providence in a couple weeks, but I don't think I'm going to play Glads.
Yeah, I really
That's
like
crazy.
the
That does-
toolbox the
Glad
deck has.
Oh yeah, it's just toolbox deck for sure.
So it's crazy that you're not considering it for Providence, considering this is arguably one of the best metagame lineups for Gladiator Beast to see success.
Yeah, it's just I don't get to. I mean, I could choose to play them, but then I wouldn't be commentating. And really, the only main reason why I'm playing it is because I live 10 minutes from the venue, and I just wanted a lot of flexibility with friends and stuff that weekend in case, people going to my house and whatnot. I didn't want to commit to commentating an event so close to my house just because I don't normally get to just drive to the venue. So because I don't do it a lot, I usually try to play one a year. This is going to kind of be that one. And I played Glads last year, so it's almost like I just want to do something different because I only get to do it once a year. And like it might actually be strategically a poor choice, but it's more of just, I did it last year with Glads. I'll do something else this year.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it is, especially since you don't have to worry about like the travel expense or anything else, because right down the road, it's literally a situation to have fun. And I feel like honestly, that is one of the reasons I had success at nationals was because whenever I showed up there, I got to meet a bunch of people that I've known online for years, and I finally got to meet them in person. And I said to myself, like day 0 before we actually started the tournament, I'm like, man, if I go 0-2, I'm still having one of the best weekends of my life. And using that kind of carefree, not having like you know, feeling like the pressure to perform or do something really helped carry me and just like actually and sitting down and just enjoy playing the game that I enjoy playing. I was able to see success from that. So hopefully that also transpires to what you're trying to do in Providence.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly hope so. I mean, I'm going to have fun no matter what. It's,
Oh yeah, I mean it's sanctioned retro Yu-Gi-Oh, something that was a concept we never thought would be a real thing, and then here we are for this will be this nationals this year will be what 3 years that it's been sanctioned now. So and we keep getting more and more support for it. So I'm just happy to be a part of the community and having people like you come on and kind of help grow the community and just enjoy the community overall. So it's nothing but good things coming, I think.
and they basically reprinted the entire Edison library of cards in the rarity collections recently.
They have been
Yes, I
doing
love that.
incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Talking about like the retro formats. What is your favorite retro format?
I get asked that question a lot. I always struggle to give an answer because I just enjoy quite a few of them. I mean, of my favorite formats,
Mhm.
I liked the summer before Exceeds came out. The one where Hansel won at Nationals. That format's really good. It's pretty underrated because, Tengu was out. Plants were really quite powerful, but they weren't so ridiculously powerful yet. I thought that format was pretty good. I enjoyed that one. I don't know if it's my favorite format, but it's just one I enjoy. I really enjoy and this one's more probably for nostalgia than the actual quality of the format, but a lot of the dark arm based formats, Teledad and dark arm return format, just because of how influential those were. Those were the formats basically during my something like senior year of high school, junior year of high school. And then that's where things really started to click for me. That's the format, at least Dad Return, where I got my first regional top. And then in Teledad format, that's kind of where I really felt like I started to understand like what it means to actually plan to win a game as opposed to just kind of playing it on the fly. That's where I really felt my understanding of the game started to really improve. It
It's
it
about the
didn't
similar time for me too. I enjoyed that whole era a whole lot, and like you said, just how iconic it was. Like having someone special, someone a dark arm, you're like, oh my goodness, like it was just it hit different if that makes sense. Like it was a time to be playing the game.
Yeah, I got my first regional top after the Dimension Fusion emergency ban that occurred during Dad Return, and it happened at Gaming ETC, which is in Stratford, Connecticut, but it's the hub of a lot. It doesn't exist in the original site anymore, but it was the hub of a lot of really well-known players from Connecticut, like Jonathan LaBounty, for instance, Team Rampage, one of the older teams in Yu-Gi-Oh! And a lot of the New York kind of tri-state players would come out. You would see, back then, people who ended up becoming my friends, but people who I just knew by name, like let's say Steven Silverman, go to that particular event, Jesse Samick, for instance. So it was just at a venue where whenever there was a regional in that area, you knew you were going to see Team Rampage. Sometimes Team Overdose would come by, Chris and Paul and all of them, Shane. So you would just go to the regional and you would see a small pocket of what you would see on coverage. And I remember as a young kid, like always being really intimidated by that environment because if the regionals were in Massachusetts where I grew up, you'd have some of those people show up, definitely, but it wasn't quite as consolidated because it's almost a 3-hour difference time-wise between where they had regionals in Mass versus in Connecticut at Gaming ETC. But I remember getting my first ever regional top at that particular venue during that particular format and just how accomplished I felt because of what that venue in and of itself meant. So that's why that particular format in that time period means a lot. Dad Return, Teledad. And then,
I know there's a
other
lot of
formats.
a lot of. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you can continue. I was going to talk about different formats. If you have a point
Oh,
relative to what I just said.
oh yeah. I was gonna say, well, that I could definitely see that because some of the names that you're mentioning there are like some of like people who are in contention for like greatest of all time, and it's just it's crazy that that whole area was so stacked, and that makes sense why everyone who kind of came out of that area were just so successful in so many different things. And I was gonna be like a follow up question we can do after that. But I was kind of wondering like who was like your mentor, like who kind of got you into like transitioning from going being a kid going to locals to being the decorated player that you are today. We can finish your other format portion of it first though, but I was thinking about that. Sorry.
Oh, that's a good question. So I wouldn't outright say that I ever had like a true mentor in that sense, like someone who I would actively talk to and may have worked with me, but I can definitely speak to people in my environment who I watched and maybe were influential in that sense. I mean, there were a lot of people who I guess you'd call them contemporaries, people who I started to play with who did not have any regional tops or any major success, but who slowly but surely started to see that. Paul Clark, CJ Lack, James Ark are all people from New England. We actually were all part of a team back in the day who I was actually the last one out of any of them to top a regional, but I remember leading up to the nationals that Chris Bowling won with Gladiator Beasts. It's like one by one, each of them got their regional top that enabled them to go to nationals. And I waited to almost the very last one in Stratford, Connecticut at Gaming ETC, like I mentioned. But a lot of those sort of contemporaries, we spoke all the time. We played when we met each other up at events. And I wouldn't call them mentors, but they were definitely people who were equally as invested in getting better. So by virtue of that, we all kind of progressed on a very similar, progression. CJ or Corey or CJ and Jimmy or James Ark, as he's often referred to, they ended up topping the nationals with Frog FTK. Paul Clark had a few YCS tops with Light Swarns and a few others kind of in those early years of our friendship. And there were a few others as well, but those are really the three that stand out, at least in the general New England area. And there were definitely a few others, but those three had a lot of success and we traveled to a lot of events together specifically. In terms of people, though, who I remember watching, Cesar Gonzalez is actually probably one of them because he's from Massachusetts specifically, unlike somebody like Jonathan Labounty, who I'm definitely friends with, but he's out in Connecticut. I only saw him at regionals, but Cesar was somebody who I would see at sneak previews very infrequently. I'd go to the locals that he would go to, but he would be somebody who I remember it really meaning something to me when he watched me play during Teledad and made a comment about the use of Solemn Judgment. And if you have any familiarity with that format, one of the big skill gaps and the differentiators was, were you somebody that Solemn Judgmented early and then usually lost because of it, or did you hold Solemn until just the absolute last possible second? Because there were 3 of them, and nobody wants to get their solemned. So in a format like that, where Solemn Judgment was such a pivotal point, I remember him just commenting on, you played your Solemn Judgments correctly. Yeah, I remember it was something like, I got brain controlled. And brain control is a really inconvenient card, and was I going to lose to it? No. Did I have something that I could do to counter it? Yeah, it would have put me in a weaker position had it resolved, but I said sure. And he said, a lot of people would have Solemn there, but it's a good thing you didn't, because the fact that you had Solemn to counteract what they did after was why you won. And I remember that really resonating with me, because Cesar at that point had multiple YCS victories. So I wouldn't call him a mentor, but I would definitely say in terms of older players and established players in my area specifically, he was definitely one whose words of encouragement did mean something at that point in time.
Yeah, he was built different. I wasn't aware he was from the East Coast. I kind of assumed he was from the West Coast because I always saw him around with Adam. But he also came like over in my area. I live in Missouri, and he came to a Kansas City regionals one time, and we were like, "Whoa, what is he doing here?" Because at that time, like if anyone's unfamiliar with who Cesar Gonzalez is, but he was like him and Adam Korn during that time during Dad. If there was an event, they were in the top 16, and they were just very, very good players. And like you said, having them give you a compliment, I would have felt the same way if they complimented on my play. It's really cool. I remember he came to our area. It was around Blackwing format. He was playing like a hybrid Blackwing list with Greffers, and I remember him doing a video with a guy's name was Dub Dad One, was the Yugi tuber at the time, and he had a video of Cesar Gonzalez playing there, and you just watch him play, and you could just tell he was on like a different level, like of thinking, where he wasn't just thinking about the cards he had, like he was thinking multiple turns in advance. And I remember the first time like playing against someone like that, where you look, it kind of gives you a paradigm shift of like your overall viewpoint of the game, instead of looking at what's in front of you and looking at what the game as a whole, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I mean, I obviously watched him a whole lot growing up too. Whenever I was able to watch him, and he played a deck like Teledad just a little bit differently than a lot of others, and it certainly translated.
Yeah, no,
I
definitely.
mean, it was
It's
like
kind of
him
like
and Adam and like basically every top cut for that format.
and then you fast
Yeah.
forward a couple years, and then basically, if there's an event that happens, you see Giorlando somewhere in the top 16. So it definitely translated down well too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's much appreciated to kind of be recognized in that same way. Those were definitely some of my some of the people I looked up to a lot, like everybody did, looking at the coverage. But it definitely is more meaningful when it's someone in your general area, like Caesar was.
'Cause
Yeah,
I
someone that you
like
hold in high regard looks at you in high regard. It's a different kind of feeling, like having that mutual respect. Having from someone that you looked up to, be like, oh wow, like you're doing really well. Like that's a. I remember the first time I had something like that help in my personal Yu-Gi-Oh career, and I know how much it meant to me, so I can see that translating the same way.
Yeah, I mean, this was before I had ever topped a YCS or anything, too. So just hearing that, and it was a few years before that ever happened, but definitely hearing that, was the okay, I'm on the right track at least.
What were you gonna say, Ty?
I was gonna say like because I remember Adams like his run before he finally like got his win. I remember like that was like one of the most legendary like topping runs like in Yu Gi and like honestly Joe, I think your topping run when you were like you literally topping like every event. I feel like that rivals that.
Yeah, Adam won some though. It was 7, and that's been so surpassed now by the modern players. It's
Oh
actually
yeah.
wild to know how they are on another level, even relative.
Yeah, like the amount of
players are.
the amount of wins people get now is it's insane. I never like I remember when Chili Luna got his fourth win. I like that like I thought that I didn't think anybody could ever surpass that. And then you're seeing like Chris LeBlanc who's got like what 6 wins now, and then you got
Jesse.
Jesse with 7.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly how many, but like Christian Urena. I mean, there's so many of them that just have so many now. It's wild. I mean, it's granted it's an extra 10 or 15 years, but still, that's really impressive.
Yeah, for sure. So I had one more question. I remember back in the day you did a video with Gerald Winston, and he asked you a question of what is a misplay, and has your like thoughts about a misplay has it changed over the years, or is it like do you still feel the same way that you did then?
Uh, I I know if you ask certain people, people have a very like black and white. It's either a misplay or it's not because you can always determine what the right play is.
Mm.
But I have a hard time being that adherent to it, to like that perspective. I know some would argue, well, if you took into consideration all the variables and all the literal number statistics and the psychological aspects of Yu-Gi-Oh, there's always one correct play. And I guess maybe if we were playing the game with supercomputers, that might be the case, but I just have a hard time imagining that in reality. So I don't think my opinion has changed, you know, in really a meaningful way. If I recall correctly, because it's been a long time since I've watched that, I think I referred to it as an abstract misplay. And then
Yeah.
I forget what I call the other one, like a literal misplay or something. But I remember it being, if you attack in the wrong order and you lose to gores, there's just no gray area there. Like you literally did it wrong.
Right.
But when all of a sudden there's subjectivity to things, then it can be abstract because it can be somewhat debatable. And I still feel like there will be so much disagreement and when people actually end up playing the game that hasn't changed. I have a hard time believing that we should consider misplays by looking at some like supercomputer that just evaluates every possible variable because that's just not practical.
Right. Right.
So I would say it's pretty consistent with what it was back then.
Okay. That was a video I watched. I couldn't tell you how many times. Just like I said, I like it, like I I took a lot of notes. Like like when it came to like players like you, Frazier. I took a lot of notes like back in the day. Just like hearing you like hearing like how y'all like talked about the game and stuff like that. Like I took like notes from like yeah, you Billy Philly Luna. That's my all time favorite. Just all like just trying to figure out like I was just trying to crack the code of
Yeah,
trying to get to that next level.
makes sense. I mean, I definitely can relate to that feeling of what is it, and it's
It's
a lot
like
of factors, but
yeah. I've it with modern. I don't like I had such a like a hard time. I think I guess it was just because like from where I wasn't playing the most I wasn't playing the most optimal decks like for most of the for most of the time like for one reason or another. But, I like but like now that I've switched to like I switched over to like playing like the Time Wizard format, formats and whatnot, and like I've still take like I'll go back and rewatch all the old videos and like I'll apply like I applied that to when I got into like starting to play Edison and just like Cole in the call I I had found your Gladiator Beast video, and that's like that was the first deck I had started playing when I got into, I guess you can call it modernized Edison now. Just I like what like just how you just described like how and why you played certain cards in that Gladiator Beast deck, and I was just like, it was like somewhat like it was. I guess like for some people it would be like people would think like, oh yeah, that's just like it would be like common knowledge. Like other people, but like for me, it was just like I opened it. I'm just like, okay, I like it was like I just received like brand new information. It's just like I remember I seen it was a thing. I remember seeing a thing about Denzel Washington still takes acting classes, and it's just like who like is like some to somebody outside of like the acting world like who's going to teach Denzel Washington how to act. And I remember him saying like if he can learn one thing, no matter how minuscule it is, to improve his acting, it was like the entire class was worth it. And like I apply that same mentality to what like when I'm like learning new things, like when it comes to like Yu-Gi-Oh.
That makes a lot of sense. Definitely gets you reflecting, never to be complacent.
Yeah.
I have a question that kind of follows up with that, I guess. So, obviously, that you're someone highly regarded in the like Yu-Gi-Oh world, Joe. And whenever you are practicing for any event you would play for, what is your pre-tournament like preparation and like ritual kind of look like? We've had other people on the channel; they swear by test playing. We have also people on the channel who say they don't test play at all, and everyone kind of has their own way of doing it. I think a lot of our viewers want to know like what does Joe do whenever he's preparing for his next big Yu-Gi-Oh event? What does it kind of look like for him to get ready for it to try to tackle whatever format or whatever he's going to be doing?
I'll speak to it what it used to be like, because what it would be like now it would just probably look a lot different, just because I'm not going to approach the Ultimate Time Wizard like I would necessarily have approached some of the older events, because you really need to be living it to be able to approach it the way I used to approach it. So it just has to look different. Like I'll do a crash course in the next 2 or 3 weeks. I should probably jam some games with Gigaplant, for instance, a deck that I mean I know how it works, but you should probably play with it yourself to really learn some of the ins and outs of it, just to recognize when to interrupt it. So what I would do today is just fundamentally different because I'm not living it quite the same. How I prepare to commentate is also a lot different. I mean, I just basically try to memorize every new card that's come out since the last time I commentated, and just devour as much content as I possibly can to learn the ins and outs. And then sometimes I actually talk to people who I know are super in the game and kind of ask them like, okay, like here are my thoughts going into this event that I have to commentate. Like I'm not one of your competitors, you don't worry about that, but like what am I missing? What have I not picked up on? What should I also know? But if you want to know like 15 years ago, it depends a little bit on the event. But back in the day, I used to go to at least one local a week, usually 2. So I had a lot of opportunities during the week to play in person, and I always preferred playing in person. And that's both today and also back in the day. I don't think you can really replicate, whether it's through mass or otherwise, just the feeling of actually holding the cards and playing with them in person. So that's what I like to do back in the day. So I'd always get a couple in, and a lot of those locals, I would try to play decks that I knew I wasn't seriously considering at events, at least once or twice. So, if you go back to, the Dino Rabbit Inzektor Dragon Rule, Chaos Dragon format, I would play Chaos Dragons at locals. I would play Inzektors at locals. I'd play Windups at locals. I very infrequently actually play Dino Rabbit at locals, just because why do I need more reps in a deck that I understand really well? I might as well just get more reps in some of the other decks and maybe see if I can explore their weaknesses or their reasons for losing games, and kind of channel that into, okay, now I need to take that information and put into a deck I'm seriously going to consider. So I would do that a lot at locals. I'd play once or twice a week and try to play decks I wouldn't typically consider at major events. And then when I actually got to the venue, I really liked on Friday watching. I spent a lot of time Friday just watching people who I recognized, or people who I respected and knew, and people whose opinions I valued, and just watching them play if they were willing to play. Because if I could watch over a table and see 2 or 3 matches going simultaneously, I feel like I'm just getting more information than the reps in.
because if I understand the format, I understand what my cards do, and I understand what the major decks do, and I can watch these games, and I know what all the cards are, and I know what all the interactions are, and I'm just trying to like watch for patterns, watch for weaknesses, watch for things like that. I felt like that was a lot more valuable, but that necessitates that you have the basis of being able to watch the games and know what everything is. If you haven't been as inundated in the game, you really then need to prioritize reps. So, for instance, I played at YCS Philadelphia it was during Castira format, like peak Castira format. It's the one that Dennis Nadas won, and they didn't have commentary that a particular event, so I got to play it. And I played Cash, and I had been playing leading up to that, like once or twice a week, and actually going to some people's houses and playing. So I was taking the event pretty seriously, just because it was modern Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't play a ton of it. Didn't back then really play a ton of it, so I really took the event pretty seriously. And that Friday, I actually played a lot more because even though I had been playing leading into that event, it was not even remotely close to the level of just comfortability that I would have had 10 years prior. So I really valued just getting more reps in on Friday, just getting as many reps in as possible, just because I knew my own weaknesses as a player relative to what it was like back in the day. Where on a Friday, I felt like I basically knew everything I would need to know in terms of interactions and popular cards and everything. And it was just a matter of just kind of recognizing actual gameplay, and I could get that better by watching. So it really kind of depends on your own comfort level into a format. If you're not very comfortable, I would recommend getting reps in against as many different decks as possible. If you're super confident, to me, I valued watching because I just felt like that was more useful relative to my understanding at that point.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because basically, if I'm understanding what you're saying, if you're like well versed and you kind of know your lines or your play pattern of your deck, you value trying to play decks you're less familiar with to kind of try to find and exploit weaknesses from within by learning the deck yourself. And on the flip side, if you're not as confident with your deck, you find more value in trying to make sure that your deck is, it as well as you can before you start trying to kind of learn how to pick apart other decks. If you have a good base standing of like how your deck should perform and how your deck should have a certain play pattern, etc., more or less, right?
Yeah. So, for instance, going back to the YCS in Philadelphia, like I knew what my cards did quite a bit, but maybe I only had 10 matches against Super Heavy Samurai, which was a really popular deck at that event. That's not a whole lot, so I could probably value a few more. I played probably 100 mirror matches with Cashier. I probably didn't need to practice that one as much, but it's useful to try and play just because I just didn't have as many reps in as maybe I would have if I was 10 years younger heading into an event where I had way more reps. So in that sense, I really needed to play that Friday. You go back 10 years, I almost very infrequently played on Friday.
Yeah, and that kind of just makes sense with just all of us being in a similar age group where you have actual like responsibilities and career, different things going on. You don't have just the exponential amount of free time to dive into the Yu-Gi-Oh. So it's really kind of not the hours you put in, but what you put in the hours that matter, kind of a thing.
There's actually another kind of interesting thing. There's one kind of weird outlier, which was the period of time. I guess Soul Charge format is what I like to refer to it as, but for Sylvans, I actually didn't go to any locals at all. The only events I ever played with Sylvans was the circuit event in Philly, then Nationals, and then another circuit event in Columbus. I only played it at 3 events. And I basically just solitaired the deck at home because it was super combo-y, but I solitaired it every day, just constantly solitaire. And I had been following the game enough and playing enough to know what all of the other decks did. I just didn't actually physically go and play it against other people at a local. And when I would get to the venue on Friday, though, it's like, okay, I've literally been solitairing this deck. I know what all the other cards do, but like I literally just need to play. So it was like very frantic, like please just anybody play. I remember playing Billy that Friday before the NEWCQ in 2014. And I think he was playing Mermail. And he's like, wow, maybe I should have played Sylvans. I was like, yeah, I can't believe you're not playing deck with Lone Fire in it. Like, this is the best deck. But I remember, like, I would typically not do that, during that particular time period. But I hadn't been going to local, so it was the complete opposite. Like, I frantically wanted to play. But I had at home been solitairing it like crazy because it was a combo deck. Like, you actually can do that. Like, you're not really going to solitaire I mean, you can, but there's not as much value in solitaire and control decks. All right,
Yeah,
I'm gonna
it's
piece
all
that. Okay,
it's
shuffle it
all
up
based
again.
on
It's like,
it's all based on reactive things instead of you learning your lines. But
yeah.
that's
And I was
awesome.
like, ooh, if I have 2 miracle fertilizers, and this was before the age of people publishing spreadsheets as commonly. So,
Oh
it's
yeah,
like, oh, if I have 2 more miracle fertilizers and I use this Mount Sylvania to discard this, like, what can I? So I just remember that was how I prepared during that particular time period.
it makes me kind of laugh too because I want to say it was on because I know you've done 2 episodes on Fraser's I'm Nerd podcast, and I've listened to
Mhm.
both of those. And you really do just like to live your Yu-Gi-Oh life on hard mode, don't you? Like you want to play Gladiator Beast, you want to play Sylvan, and do all these hard extra. Yeah, you have to jump through hoops whenever there's another deck available that you can play that takes a lot less brain power and a lot less like effort. Like with Black Wings and Edison, you can just go whirlwind summon sure attack, and now you're +2. But you always want to take the hard route. It seems like is what I was laughing about.
Well, I mean, seeing as how most people associate that YCS streak with Macro Rabbit, that's a interesting comment that maybe
Well, I was saying
15
with
years
the
ago people
Sylvans,
would have.
yeah, with the
Yeah, I mean, in
Sylvans,
those cases, yeah, for sure. I
yeah.
mean, for what it's worth, I thought Sylvan was the best deck.
Well,
I mean,
Sylvans is
let me
incredible.
rephrase that. I thought it was the deck that gave me personally the best chance of doing well because I felt like I knew it really well, and that was still a little bit under the radar of people's like full understanding of how the deck worked. Like it was, people knew it, but they didn't know it.
Yeah,
So
incredibly hard to play because it's so, like you said, so non-linear. So the more decision points you have, the more it favors a better player like yourself. So that's why I was saying it's just kind of a funny thing where it just seems like you want to take the hard road. You know what I mean? And have to challenge yourself to do it because that's what made me kind of laugh about it.
I'll say that that might just be more correlation than anything. I always had the mindset of I need to play the deck that I think gives me the best chance of winning. And a lot of times that was kind of control based decks like Dino Rabbit or Hero Beat. But for that particular event and like that particular time period, I literally thought Sylvans gave me the best chance. Because here's the deal with that particular time period. There were really good control decks, obviously, Hat. I mean, we'll just call it Hat format. And Gear, all of those decks were really good. But if I'm not going to go to locals and I'm not going to jam the mirror matches, I'm not going to get the reps in with the sequencing of traps and resources, which is really how you win 5, 6, 7 of those types of matchups against each other. Like that really favors a person that understands the intricacies. But if I'm not going to go to locals, I don't have as much of an opportunity. But if I jam and solitaire my Sylvan deck, and I know what all the other cards do, I know what the gear did, I know what all the decks do. But if I can master the combos and Sylvans and kind of understand the sequences, that actually I think gave me the best chance because that was like right when college was ending for me. So I was like a little bit busier than normal. That was like right around student teaching ending. So I wasn't going to locals. So I was like, okay, relative to my options, I actually think Sylvan just gives me the best chance, even though there's really good control decks. I just don't have a chance to practice with them.
Yeah, I completely understand that, and that makes total sense. Is a comparison I've recently kind of made too is something similar to that, like looking at modern Yu-Gi-Oh versus like retro Yu-Gi-Oh. With retro Yu-Gi-Oh, you have a lot more decisions based over a series of turns, and with modern Yu-Gi-Oh, you still have roughly the same amount of decisions. It's just all condensed into a string of the first and second, third, fourth turn instead of multiple turns on the game. You have just one really long extended
Yeah,
turn
of
where it's
course.
still same kind of thing of trying to check for, in modern you'll check for hand traps, different points of interaction, things like that. You do the same thing in retro, just it's with the trap cards on the field and it's over a series of turns instead of in a big sequence.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know we're getting kind of
I mean,
close to the hour-ish mark. Cole, was there anything else that you wanted to kind of ask Joe about or any points you want to bring up?
Well, speaking of plant combo decks, I think I remember like you had a video. I don't know if it was taken down at some point, but I think it was like maybe 2014, 2015. I think it was titled "Did Konami Make
yep,
a Mistake by Unbanning Glow Up Bulb?"
unbanning Glow Bulb.
Yep. And I remember
I
I
think I
used
still
to.
have the video on here. It's just, I think it's because it's not in the format of most of my videos. I just kind of made it private, but I'm pretty sure it's on here somewhere. I'm like on my YouTube, it's just talking about this. I know exactly the video you're talking about.
And I think I would watch it like multiple times because I played I built Gigavize because I was just like so interested in all the combo lines and stuff and how you could make double Colossal Fighter Armory Arms since you couldn't colossal armory like you could in Edison anymore.
Yep, I remember that.
And I just thought like that was because all your videos I love your channel. Your channel is probably my favorite like Yugi tube type channel, honestly. But the way you like point out the combos and stuff just made me and I think that was close to the time we got Snatch Still back for I think a
That
format,
sounds about right.
and you could power tool search Snatch Still, and I just thought that was so funny. But I love how all your videos are so like concise, and you have such a unique perspective, not only through your teaching experience, which definitely shows through, but your experience within the game too. So you just have this angle that no one else really could come from, and you're just like you found the correct niche, and you're also the perfect person to fill that niche.
Very
That's much
or,
appreciated.
it's a very well organized channel.
I mean, you should see my Google Drive. my school Google Drive. It's color coded. It's wild. So I try to make the channel organized too.
That's just being a teacher. I'm assuming have to have everything nice and kind of thought out. There's a famous quote by Mark Twain, who's also a fellow Missourian, and I like to yap a lot. But it's I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I had to write you a long letter, just saying how there's more
Basically,
and being more concise and well put together the way you do that versus someone like me who I just yap and just don't stop.
Is there anything you wanted to
I mean,
add?
and my videos are still like 30 minutes long sometimes. So it's only so concise, but
Well, it's concise.
I do appreciate the compliments.
Is the importance, concise, thorough, good, and you always have the nice foreign shiny cards. That's the thing. These newer players, they don't like as much back in the day. Like back in the day, if you had if max rarity and foreign, like that was the cream of the crop there.
Mhm.
So I like to see that still in all the videos too, because I still try to get higher rarity and foreign cards myself. But I
Yeah,
understand
that's
wanting to explain a tier combo to someone in all German. I could see that being a little difficult.
yeah. I definitely enjoy the ability to re-sleeve some of these decks in those cards because otherwise they just kind of sit in my collection binders most of the time. And I definitely solitaire basically every single one of those decks before I put them back, just to little nostalgic.
Oh yeah, it's one of the tell me a Yu-Gi-Oh player without tell me a Yu-Gi-Oh player. I'm currently shuffling 4 tokens right now in my hand while we're talking. Just always.
I mean, I was doing that a little bit earlier. I have a pile
Yep.
of cards on my office desk that are so beat up because they just get shuffled.
I was remember I was my ex-girlfriend was living with us, and we were making sandwiches like just with, and she handed me a bunch of like regular like cheese slices, right, like the Kraft American singles. I was sitting there, I was shuffling my hand like cards, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "You wouldn't understand, sorry."
Yeah, you kind of need to. Yeah, it's a lifelong thing.
Oh yeah, it'll never go away, I don't think. But
No.
Ty, did you have any closing remarks you wanted to ask for our guest today?
No, I didn't have any more questions. I was really glad I got to be on this episode of the pod and got to had the ability to talk to you. Like I said, like you were one of my favorite players from back in the day. Like just like always highly valued your opinion, still do. It's been great.
Well, it's my pleasure.
We can't thank you enough for coming on, Joe. You've been highly requested by people in the comments and just with us, like in general. You're very loved by the community, whether it's modern, retro, YouTube, no matter where they're at. We'll be sure to link all of your different things down in the description below. So where all can they find you besides your YouTube channel?
I do have a Twitter that I do occasionally comment from every once in a while. It's the same username as my YouTube, YGO_history. Those are really the two primary places to find me. YouTube, which I do promise I will make some videos again. That this summer specifically, I'll definitely, because I've been accumulating some cards for videos over the course of the last year or so. So I will definitely be making a few videos over the summer again for sure. But then that and my YouTube.
Awesome. Yeah, I personally can't wait to see them. I always look forward to your content. So we definitely appreciate you having on. What about you, Cole? Do you have any closing remarks?
No, just thank you for coming on. It's been great. You're a fantastic player with a great insight to the game. It was great to talk to you.
Yeah, no worries. Anytime.
All right, well, that's Cole, Enrage, Ty, and Joe Giorlando signing off from the Edison Club podcast. See you later.
Hamster Ryko Caius, Hamster Ryko Caius. I go check the pairings, I'm like, don't know who this guy is. Hamster Ryko Caius, Hamster Ryko Caius. 2-0 every round, man, and I ain't even trying. It's just Hamster Ryko Caius, Hamster Ryko Caius.